are going to go through 5 pros and 5 cons for every single category. We have 2 categories. We have kibble and we have raw dog food. And this would apply to cat food as well. So we have 5 pros and 5 cons for each kibble or raw. Now, the debate isn't so much what is best, because what is best can be a little bit subjective. What we are trying to decide are some of the pros or cons for you, to you as a consumer, basically. Does raw or kibble fit your lifestyle a bit more, one or the other? That's what the video is about. It's not between kibble and raw when it comes to maybe quality or the intrinsic value of it, but more or what it suits you. Like, what do you think? The first pro of kibble has to be convenience. It has to be convenience. Kibble is very easy to store, and it can be stored for a very, very long time. We can transport it and we can measure it a bit better. You literally only have to feed like a handful or 2 handfuls or whatever, and it's pretty easy. So the convenience is there. That can also have a bit of an impact on portion control. Kibble, this is. So it's easy to store, and portion control is a bit better. You can measure it a bit more. For example, I feed raw, and sometimes it's a bit hard to know how much I am giving my dog. But with kibble, you can do like 3 handfuls or 4 handfuls or whatever, and that can be a pro for kibble. The second one has to do with affordability. Kibble is more affordable. Why? Well, it is often mixed with a lot of starches, which is what binds kibble together. And so kibble is generally a lot cheaper than raw food. However, it does depend. It depends on the quality of the kibble, and it depends on the actual availability of the kibble sometimes. So convenience and affordability, those would be the first 2 pros of kibble. And yes, kibble can be more affordable. The third one is shelf life. I mean, kibble simply lasts longer. For any raw feeders out there, yes, you have to give it to them. Anything that's preserved, anything that has a lot of preservatives, or anything that can be on your shelf for a while, that is better. Or is it? So the shelf life is, kibble has a longer shelf life. So you can buy in bulk if you have an offer. For example, if something is on offer, you can buy it ahead of time, and you can save more money that way. So for kibble, we have convenience, we have affordability, and we have shelf life. We then have the completeness sometimes of kibble. If you buy raw food, sometimes you buy different things. You DIY the food, you buy the 80-10-10, you buy meat, you buy offal, you buy chicken ducks, and you buy bone, and you buy liver, and you buy spleen and heart and tripe and gizzard and whatever. With kibble, you buy kibble, and that is everything the dog needs in theory. So you buy something and it's more convenient. You just buy it, you give it to the dog, and you don't really have to worry about giving the dog anything else. So high quality kibble is contains everything your dog needs. So for the pros of kibble, we have convenience, affordability, shelf life, and the fact that it's more complete. You just buy it and you give it to the dog and you forget about it. You don't have to be measuring offal and bone and gizzard and tongue and spleen and heart and liver and all these things. And number 5 has to do with that, with the fact that all the extra vitamins and minerals should be in kibble. So what do I mean? I mean that a lot of kibble will contain extra glucosamine or psyllium husk, for example, which is extremely good for good bacteria and their digestive system. Things can have a bit more in kibble. You can buy more things that are in kibble. That kibble will have more vitamins, more minerals, because these are just like standard things that the industry does. So for the convenience, for the pros of kibble, we have convenience, affordability, we have shelf life, we have the fact that it's more complete, and the fact that it can be fortified with all the vitamins and minerals that it has. Some of the pros, the first one has to do with processing. It's a processed product. So fresh is fresh, as we say on this channel, and processed is processed. And kibble is a processed food. Now, Kibble is not just one single product. We have a spectrum. We have some kibbles that are absolutely atrocious, and we have some kibbles that are wonderful. Some kibbles have been very gently dehydrated and they retain a lot more nutrients, whereas some kibbles are absolutely appalling and they do not contain anything nutritious whatsoever. So the first con of kibble is that it's processed. We are looking at processed food. You cannot tell me that a chicken breast is better than a pellet. A chicken breast and some carrots cannot be worse off than McDonald's. It isn't. McDonald's is worse. Why? It's processed. Whether McDonald's is good for you or bad for you, we don't really know. But processed food cannot be as good as fresh food. The second pro is that uh, 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 some dogs actually prefer it. They prefer it, and in terms of palatability, sometimes kibble isn't as palatable as raw because again it has been processed. So some dogs find kibble boring especially when you compare it to raw food, because it has more moisture. Is Raw is more biologically appropriate, as it were. So the palatability of of um, of kibble rather isn't as good as raw. Raw, more moisture, more appetizing for our dogs, a bit better. The third one has to do with carbohydrates, and this is the biggest pet peeve for me whenever it comes to kibble versus raw. Uh, Many kibbles are very high in carbohydrates, and these carbohydrates contribute to weight gain and other health issues. Let me put it to you this way. So first of all, dogs do not have something called amylase in their mouth, and amylase is an enzyme that breaks down carbohydrates in their mouth. They don't have it. They do not have it. It doesn't exist. So by you feeding your dog carbohydrates, you are feeding them something that isn't necessary. It isn't even biologically necessary. They can actually make their own blood sugar from protein and fat in a process called gluconeogenesis. So one of the biggest pet peeves with kibble has to do with wheat gluten, with corn, with barley, with potato, with all these fillers that manufacturers put in the kibble that it just isn't very good for our dogs. And this is something irrefutable. You can't tell me that wheat gluten is good in high quantities in pet food. That is just simply not sustainable. It doesn't really do a very good service to our dogs. The third one has to, or the fourth one rather, has to do with fillers. Some kibbles, and these has to do with carbohydrates as well, contain fillers like corn and soy, and things that aren't very good, like potato protein, for example, soya protein, pea starch is another one, pea protein is another one, and these provide very little nutritional value. If you go to a restaurant and you order sirloin, that contains extremely healthy protein. Potato protein isn't the same one as sirloin protein, and it cannot be deemed the same. So that is surely a drawback of kibble. So we have processing, it's processed. We have carbohydrates, the vast amount of carbohydrates in pet food, in kibbles. We have fillers, which aren't very good, and we have the palatability. And the fifth one has to do with certain ingredients and the unknown origin. We do not know where certain ingredients come from in kibble. So, meat and animal derivatives, we have animal fats, we have things like soya protein, for example. Where does that come from? Hi, Kura Reaper, how are you? So the ingredients in some kibbles are, we do not know the provenance of them. Your meat and animal derivatives, again, your animal fats, a lot of veterinary prescription diets, for example, are very, very vague in their ingredients. So that has to be another con of kibble. So we have, it's processed, it's a processed food. Processed is not as good as fresh. We have carbohydrates, it's very high in carbohydrates in certain for certain kibbles. We have fillers, we have high amounts of fillers. We have the palatability, it isn't as desirable as raw food. And some of the ingredients we don't really know where they come from. Let's go into raw food. Some of the pros, right? First one, it's more biologically appropriate. Raw food resembles a bit more closely what dogs would eat in the wild, and it's more digestible for some dogs. It's more biologically appropriate, as we say in the industry. It's what our dogs are arguably designed to eat, and it's something wonderful. The second pro is an improved health. So raw feeders, and this is something we see all the time. Um, our dogs have healthier, shinier coats. We have healthier skin, more energy. We have less waste. We have improved dental health. We have all sorts of health benefits whenever we move our dogs onto fresh food, onto raw food. Number three has to do with weight management, and this goes back or harks back to the kibble not being biologically appropriate and filled with fillers. Weight management is a lot easier on raw than it is on kibble because, again, fresh food, it's more filling. It's a lot more filling than pellets, and pellets can be a lot. You can put too much food down with kibble, whereas with raw food, a kilo of raw food or a pound or half a pound of raw food is quite substantial. So it's a lot easier to do portion control with raw food. Number four has to do with dental health. And again, because you are feeding your dog an 80-10-10 or something with vegetables, but that have been probably cooked a tiny bit, your dog's mouth is going to be better off. And your dog's gums and your dog's teeth are going to be a lot better and a lot better off. And number five has to do with hydration. I mean, the amount of water some dogs drink um, with kibble, with those pellets, is staggering. But it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. Whenever you move your dog onto raw, they magically and suddenly start drinking a lot less because fresh food is very, very rich in water. Kura Reaper says that raw is also more varied in flavor. Yes, imagine eating dry crackers as the only thing you eat every single day. boring. Yes, I couldn't agree more. I could not agree more. It's richer. It's more vibrant. It's a lot better. It is a lot better. Now let's get into the cons now. First of all, we have cost. And this is something that some people try to argue about, but raw food is more expensive than kibble. Why? Well, it's fresh. It is fresh, and you pay for good quality. And raw food, it's a bit more expensive than kibble, even if the kibble you feed is very expensive to start with. The second one has to do with preparation. Raw food requires a bit more preparation than kibble. Maybe not, it's not an odyssey, but it requires a bit more preparation than kibble. You have to source the ingredients, you have to thaw the food, you have to prepare the food. There is a lot more to raw food. If you are a busy professional, if you have a family, if you simply cannot be asked with raw, this is something you might not want. You might not want the extra layers in preparation. Number three, and this is if you don't really know what you are doing, this has to do with handling the bacteria, if you want to call it that, in raw food. You have to be a bit more mindful about it. This is not to say that it should be avoided, because it is avoided by responsible raw feeders, but making sure you know your way around the kitchen is one thing that raw feeders have to be a bit more mindful of. You have to, if you use knives, for example, if you use chopping boards, whatever you do with food, with live food, with raw food, with a piece of chicken, you have to be mindful of bacteria, cross contamination. Knowing your way around the kitchen is a big thing, in my opinion. Number four, and this is especially if you do a DIY sort of scenario, is the nutrition balance and the completeness of raw food. Um, if you are DIYing your food, and this is something we see all the time, it's almost always the case that people aren't doing it right. They'll just feed one single protein. They'll just feed chicken breast, for example, and they don't feed any bone. They don't include any offal. They don't include any liver. They don't include any spleen. They don't rotate the meats. That's important, in my opinion. So if you are creating an inclusive, a balanced, whatever the term you want to use, it's important that you know and you educate yourself on how to do it. And the fifth one, and again, this is a lot harder to do if you DIY the food, is you have to supervise your dog sometimes. If you give your dog bones, if you feed them bones, and even if they're very experienced, you always want to keep an eye just in case. You always want to monitor the situation. So there is a bit of a choking hazard there. Again, this is nothing too serious, and I feed my dog bones pretty much all the time, and he's fine with everything. So, but there is a bit of a choking hazard, especially if you are starting out, and especially if you don't really know what you are doing. So, Kibble, some pros: the convenience, the affordability, the shelf life. It's more complete. You have to just buy and you give it to the dog, and that's all there is to it. And some added vitamins and minerals. You don't have to worry about anything else. You give the dog the kibble, and that's everything in theory the dog would need. The cons is processed food. It is processed, whether it's minimally processed or very processed, it is processed. It isn't as good as fresh. Second one has to do with carbohydrates. Too many carbohydrates in kibble. We then have some fillers, corn, wheat, barley, that sort of thing. Not very good. Palatability is not as palatable as fresh food. and then some of the ingredients are impossible to trace. Mama Bear says kibble starts going bad as soon as it is opened. Needs to be stored properly and used quickly. Yes, yeah, but it does have a longer shelf life, Mama Bear. Whenever it comes to, it is true that as soon as you open a bag of kibble, especially if it contains something like salmon oil, for example, it'll go rancid or it'll start going rancid. But obviously the shelf life is a lot longer than with fresh food. I mean, if you've ever forgotten to defrost or to leave a tray of fresh food, it goes bad and smelly very very quickly. You can put kibble down 3 days later, it's still there. Will it be a bit rancid? Yeah, maybe. But yes, I completely agree with you. Some of the pros of raw food: it's more biologically appropriate. It's their natural diet. It's just what they were designed to eat. Second one, improved benefits across the board. Shinier coat, the teeth are better, the skin is better, fewer allergies, not as many health issues like diabetes, pancreatitis, uh, better, better everything, really. The third one has to do with their weight management. You can, a kilo of food, of fresh food, is big, whereas a kilo or the comparable measurement in kibble is a lot harder to eye out, you know. So dental health, that is totally a pro rather of raw food. Your dog's teeth will be a lot better off on raw food. And number 5 is hydration. Your dog is going to be better hydrated because fresh food contains more water. It's just the way it is. And if you don't believe me, you can fry whatever you want. Chicken breast, for example, it'll shrink. It'll shrink because of the water. Some of the cons of raw food is the cost. It's almost always more expensive to feed raw than it is to feed kibble. Second one has to do with preparation. It takes a bit more time to go to the shop and to thaw and to prepare and to store and to be a bit more cognizant, a bit more mindful about the whole thing. Number 3 rather, has to do with bacteria and has to do with you being a responsible raw feeder and you knowing your way around the kitchen. Very, very important. Um, I harp on it all the time. Number 4 is the nutrition imbalances. If you DIY the food, sometimes people don't really know what they are doing, and so they create imbalances. They don't really know what they are doing, and bless them. That's what we are here for, and the community is quite strong. And the fifth one has to do with bones and potentially choking hazards. And especially if you are starting out with raw food, then there might be that you need to take it a bit slower whenever whenever we give or feed bones to our dogs. What is better? It depends. It depends on you. It depends on your lifestyle. It depends on what you are prepared to do. It depends on how much you want to do something. For example, if you feed raw, you have to keep at it and you have to factor that raw preparation and everything else into your life. And so I am a raw feeder, but I'm a huge believer in good kibble as well. And sometimes, if you cannot feed raw for whatever reason, maybe adding a fresh food day can be a game changer. Maybe on a Sunday when you've got a bit more time, you can buy something that's fresh, something that's biologically appropriate, and so you do maybe 6 days of kibble and 1 day of raw, and What's wrong with that? If that's all you can do, then more power to you, my friend. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Please like, please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.